Shalom, friends. Robert Gottslig here from the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry. The last time we got to look at the book of Zechariah together, we looked at Zechariah's 8th and last nightly vision that he had in one night. And we saw that in chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. And there we saw that Zechariah had this vision of 4 chariots and 2 mountains of brass. And I had mentioned last time that the brass symbolizes judgment. We know that the Messiah, that Jesus is going to bring judgment upon this world in the tribulation period. He's going to get the attention of nation Israel. We know that at his second coming, he's going to judge the nations for coming against his people. And so the brass symbolizing judgment. And today we're going to look at the remaining verses in chapter 6. We're going to look at verses 9 through 15 here. But I'd like to just read the last verse 8 of our last study time that we had together. And it says here in chapter 6 here, in that 8th verse, it says, Then cried he upon me, and spake unto me, saying, Behold, these that go toward the north country have quieted my spirit in the north country. And there I said that there's coming a day where God's judgment upon this world, yes, it will end as Jesus comes back at his second coming. His spirited will be quieted when we see the Messiah return, when he sets up his millennial kingdom here on earth. And when we look at verses 10 through 15, it's really depicting that time, the time of the millennial reign of Christ. And here we look at I'm going to read here verse 9 and onward here. It says, Take of them of the captivity, even of Heldai and Tobijah, and of Jediah, which are come from Babylon, and come thou the same day, and go into the house of Josiah, the son of Zephaniah. And then, so really these people that are listed here are those in captivity, in Babylonian captivity, and they're asked to do something here. And so look at verse 11. Then take silver and gold and make crowns and set them upon the head of Joshua, the son of Joshadek, the high priest. Now, these crowns here, it's interesting to see. So they're to take silver, to take gold, or to make these 2 crowns, which I believe really is just a double-ringed single crown. And look at what they're to do with these. It says that they were to set them on the head of Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, and speak unto them, saying, verse 12, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, Behold the man, whose name is the branch, and he shall grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. And so here they're to take these crowns, put them on Joshua, the high priest, on his head. And but then it's talking about the branch. This is another messianic reference to the Messiah. If you haven't seen the video, the sermon by video on the branch earlier in chapter 3, I would encourage you, friends, to do that, to go back and to listen to that teaching, because it's incredible when you look at the branch and you see messianic references to that of the Messiah. And here we're told here that in verse 12, he's called, Behold the man. Well, that's John 19:5. That's what Pilate did when Jesus was scourged, and a crown of thorns was placed on his head and a purple robe. And Pilate brought him forth to in front of the people, and he said, Behold the man. That's John 19:5. And so here we see the branch. He will grow up out of his place, and he will build the temple of the Lord. You see, this is talking about the millennial temple. If you heard me say before, this isn't the temple that the Jewish people are trying to build now. That's the tribulation temple. That is the temple that Daniel talks about, that Antichrist will defile halfway through. He will cause the sacrifice to cease. And he'll want to be worshipped as God. But this here is the millennial temple. This is Ezekiel's temple that Ezekiel talks about in chapters 40 through 48. And here we see that the Messiah is going to build this temple. And it says he's going to sit and he's going to rule upon his throne, and he shall be a priest on his throne. So there's thus the 2 crowns. You see, in Israel's history, the high priest couldn't be the king, and the king wasn't the high priest. But here we see that Jesus, the Messiah, will be in his millennial kingdom. That kingdom come, by the way, when you pray, Our Father who art in heaven, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. You're praying for this kingdom to come. You're praying for this millennial kingdom to come. This was the kingdom that was offered to Israel that they rejected. And here it's going to be offered again, and this time they will accept. And Jesus will bring his millennial kingdom, his rule upon the world. And he'll rule on the throne of his father David from Jerusalem for 1,000 years. And he will rule as king and high priest after the order of Melchizedek, in which we read about in Psalm 110 and Genesis 14 and Hebrews chapter 5. You can look at that. And here he's going to reign as high priest and king. Thus, that's the symbolism here of this crown that they were instructed to build. And look, if you will, here in verse 14. And the crowns shall be to Helem and to Tobijah and to Jedaiah and to the Hen, the son of Zephaniah, for a memorial in the temple of the Lord. And they that are afar off, verse 15, shall come and build in the temple of the Lord, and you shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me unto you, and this shall come to pass if you will diligently obey the voice of your God. So you see, friends, here you have the Messiah and his millennial kingdom. He's going to return. He's going to build the temple. The Gentiles, it says here, will also help and assist to build that temple. And what a wonderful time that's going to be. And as I mentioned, about the Jewish people in our last talk there, how are you treating the Jewish people, friends? Because they're precious in the eyes of the Lord. The Lord loves them with an everlasting love. And, we read in Scripture in so many places where you're going to see the preeminence of the Gentiles shift to that of the Jewish people. And when we come to Zechariah 8, you're going to see that the nations will grab the hem of him that is a Jewish person, and they'll say, take us to God, for we have heard that he's with you. Friends, I long for that day. When I pray that Our Father, I remember that. When I get up in the morning and I see the sun shining, I remember that too, because it tells me, as we read about in Jeremiah chapter 31, that as long as that sun and moon and stars are shining in the sky, that Israel will not cease from being a nation before God forever. And when I see the sun shining, I'm remembered of God's faithfulness to Israel as he's regathering them back in the days in which we live here. But it also reminds me that he's going to be faithful to me, and he won't break his promise with me in that new covenant that we have been grafted in, that was promised to Israel. Oh, friends, as I mentioned, we owe the Jewish people so much. Well, friends, that concludes chapter 6, and that's all the time we have for today. If you like this video on my Facebook page or YouTube channel, just give it a like and share it with all your friends. And so until next time, shalom.